Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Feel to Heal podcast, a mental health podcast to break the negative stigma surrounding all things mental health. In this week's episode, we're going to be jumping right back into the Four Agreements, which it's been a few months since I last read a chapter from this book. But today we're going to be discussing chapter 5. And chapter 5 is all related to the last and the fourth agreement, which is to always do your best. So, we have reached the last agreement in this book, and there's still a couple chapters left, but I did want to just jump right into it and talk a little bit about what this chapter was about. On page 76, it says, everything is alive and changing all the time, so your best will sometimes be high quality and other times it will not be as good. So this whole chapter was related to you doing your best no matter what. And your best is going to be looking and your best is going to look different every single day because some days you're going to be having more energy or feeling um better than other days. And whatever that day looks like for you, whether it's full of energy, excited, happy, energized, your best will probably look differently than on different days when you're lacking energy, when you might be sad, when you might be just not fully there. But something that I noted is that again, your best is going to always look different. So every day your best is not going to be the same as so you can't put pressure on yourself that every day you need to have the same amount of doing your best because again, there's different factors and different things that will interfere with how you can show up for yourself that day. Another thing that I noted was on page 80, here it says, on the other hand, if you take action just for the sake of doing it without expecting a reward, you will find that you will enjoy every action you do. Rewards will come, but you are not attached to the reward. You can even get more than you would if you would have imagined for yourself without expecting a reward. If we like what we do, if we always do our best, then we are enjoying life. So, what I took out of that is basically don't do things just to get a reward back because sometimes you won't get a reward back. And that can bring up a lot of resentment, anger, frustration of like, oh, well, why did I do that thing if I wasn't gonna get a reward back? So something that I thought of when I read this was like, let's say you're helping somebody, you're doing a favor for somebody. If you're doing a certain favor or helping somebody like a friend, family member, or even a stranger, and you're doing it only because you're like, well, they're gonna owe me a favor now that I did them a favor, they might not give you a favor back or they might not um give you the appreciation or the reward that you're looking for. And if they don't, you're going to hold that resentment towards that person where you're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I did this for them and they're not giving me that same energy back." So, sometimes it can have a negative impact if you are always doing something just because you want something in return. So, it's important to do things like helping other people without expecting something in return because if they do give you something back in return, whether it's they give you a favor or let's say you loaned somebody some money that needed money for something, and then later on down the line, you're in need of money and they're willing to help you, then that's great, you know? But not everybody is going to give you that same energy back. Not everybody's going to, um, you know, there's not always gonna be a reward. So, kind of separating the reasons why you do things and not, again, expecting something in return will help a lot to not have those negative emotions of resentment and anger because you're just doing it out of the kindness of your heart and not, again, expecting something in return. And I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with of wanting to help people, but only helping if they think that they're gonna get something in return. But it's important to not think that way because, again, not everything is gonna have an immediate reward or an immediate effect that you're gonna see, the next day or that same day. Because sometimes the rewards don't come until later on. Um, so something else that stood out to me was page 84, where it says, letting go of the past means you can enjoy the dream that is happening right now. When I read this, a lot that came up was anxiety and depression. Now, where does that usually stem from? So, something that I've seen a lot when anxiety and depression are being brought up is that living in the past brings depression and living in the future brings anxiety. Because if you're thinking of the past all the time, which is something that if I'm admitting, is something that I do all the time, because I think of the past. Oh, I used to be so happy during this time, or oh my God, I miss these people that I used to know, or I wish my life would look the way it did back then. That's going to bring a lot of depression because you're comparing what your life was like to what your life is now. And 99% of the time, your life is going to look very different than it used to. And that it might be it might be different in a good way, it might be different in a bad way, but it's going to look different. Um, And then if you look into the future all the time and are always worrying about what's gonna happen, where are you gonna be 5, 10 years from now, where are you gonna be next year, you're gonna bring a lot of anxiety because you can't tell what's gonna happen in the future. You can't tell what the future holds, so you're gonna bring a lot of anxiety of trying to control the future even though you have no control over the future. So, the most important thing that everybody can do, and this is something that I really, really struggle with, is living in the present. Because the present is the only time that you're currently living in. If you think about the past, you can't go back in time, right? You can't go back to the time that you're, longing for to get that time back because you can't, which is a sad reality. And then you can't look into the future because, again, we can't control what happens in the future. So you trying to control every little thing is impossible. So all we can do is look at the present, which is right now, and what are the decisions you can make right now to live a good life and not, you know, fixate on the past and not fixate on the future. So that is something that I really, really, really am trying to work on and not live so much in the past or the future because again, it's not helpful. I can't change either or. Um, so that is something that I really suggest trying to keep that in the back of your mind of, okay, I need to live in the present. That's all I have right now, and that's all I can really control or worry about. So something else that I noted was towards the last part of this chapter is page 88. So these are the 4 agreements because again, this chapter brought up the last agreement. So these are just kind of summarizing the 4 agreements again. It's being impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. So those are the 4 agreements that were brought up in this book. And again, we went through every single one of those agreements in detail. But as the chapter mentions here, with those 4 things, if you really, really focus on implementing those things in your life, it will help tremendously you having a more peaceful and easygoing and less stressful life. Again, realizing that your best is gonna look different every day, right? So not putting pressure that every day needs to look the same. And, um, the other agreements were, um, not making assumptions. This is one that I think is probably a really important one, to not assume things about other people, to not assume things about situations, because you're just creating an imaginary scenario because you don't really know what the truth is. So you're just assuming things, right? And then the second one was don't take anything personally because again, everybody's going through their own thing. Everybody's projecting things onto people in a different way. And we can't take anything personally. This is one that I really struggle with, um, because I'm always thinking that, like, people are, like, doing things because they don't like me, or, "Oh my god, I have to be careful with what I do because, you know, I don't wanna, upset somebody," but it's, again, not taking anything personally, and if somebody has a problem with you, they will tell you, and if they don't tell you, then you can't assume that there's an issue, right? Because again, you're just creating a scenario in your mind. And then the first agreement was be impeccable with your word. So your word has a lot of power, and I think it's super important to say what you're gonna do. So if you're gonna do something and you said it, I think it's important to stick to your word, because that's how people can trust you and know that you're gonna go through with what you say you're gonna do. And just even just with your words, like saying things out loud, positive things out loud, you will eventually start to believe it the more and more you say it out loud. Not even just thinking about it in your head, but like looking in the mirror and saying, I am important, you know, I am loved, people care about me. Saying those things in the mirror, you might not necessarily believe it, but the more you say it out loud, eventually your brain will start to believe it slowly. So those were the 4 agreements. We still have a few chapters left, probably 2 or 3 chapters of the book left. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I'll see you next time.